Hi, everyone. Welcome to At the Root of It. And today I have a friend, Brittany, and we will be discussing forgiveness. Bit of an intense topic. Yeah. Brittany, would you like to give a quick introduction to yourself to help our audience frame maybe some of your life perspectives and, will help ultimately guide how you'll see this topic in the lens of?
Yeah, definitely. Hey, everybody. My name is Brittany. I'm working in tech now, but my life has taken many, many turns up until this point. So I'd like to think that I have kind of a well-rounded, perspective on things. Grew up relatively poor, welfare, trailer park, like the whole gambit. At some point in our early life, my family converted to Christianity, and we experienced a lot of the conservative Christian really hard hitting, church 3 times a week family, and ended up going to a private Bible school as well. Learned a lot about Christianity and the foundations of religion in general. And funny enough, no longer was Christian coming out of a Christian university. So I had a lot of well rounded experiences learning about life and the world coming out of school. Since then, I am now agnostic. I'm married to an atheist. I'm covered in tattoos. I live in Portland, Oregon, and I'm kind of a nerd. I think all of those very perfectly describe my journey to here and kind of who I am now.
Awesome. I relate to actually many aspects of that. I also
Mm-hmm.
spent a good amount of formative years in high school living in a trailer park. So,
And this is why this is going to be a great episode, I think.
and how I got there also has a lot to do with forgiveness. So,
Mhm.
um, maybe I'll kind of start a little soft. Like, obviously, there's a lot of things that come to mind when we think of forgiveness, and I know this is a topic you and I kind of arrived at to have this discussion together. But what would you say is like the first thing that comes to mind that made you really drawn to wanting to talk about forgiveness?
I think there's a lot of things in my life up until now that have been inherently out of my control and things that I haven't really had say in up until I got to become an adult. And there was a lot of experiences that have kind of tallied up in my life that I've kind of had to go back and forgive people for, forgive a situation, forgive a group of people for. And I feel like inherently a lot of what is tied to your own happiness as an adult has to tie back to forgiveness for the things that happen to you, or things that you even do yourself, because nobody's perfect. And of course, though I feel like I've been wronged or harmed in many ways in my life, I'm sure I've also been the person to harm people, be the reason that other people have to forgive as well. So I think it's just a foundational aspect of life that not a lot of people think about. And I think it's important. It's important to talk about, what does forgiveness mean to you? What does forgiveness mean in general? How do you forgive, etc. I think it's just really one of those hard hitting topics that not a lot of people really think too hard about. So I'm excited to dive in.
Yeah, I mean, you often hear the phrase, yeah, forgive but don't forget. Was forgiveness or your perspectives on forgiveness always like this, or is it something that you have evolved and grown into?
I think my perception of forgiveness is altered a lot over the years. I kind of grew up in a situation where everybody was kind of like hit first before somebody hits you. And then entering the church at some point, it was like, oh, forgiveness is inevitable. Like, you have to forgive everybody. That's the foundational structure of what we believe is forgive, forgive, forgive. And you're kind of required from a lot of religious perspectives to just forgive immediately without really processing or wanting to forgive. And so there's always a bit of a resistance there. And as I've gotten older and I think my life is becoming a little bit more well-rounded. It's more of a balanced approach of, yes, you still need to process and you still need to manage your forgiveness, but it's okay to be angry about something for a while, and it's okay to like be salty for a while, but at the end of the day you need to like really focus on making peace with yourself about what happened, and I think that's part of forgiveness. So I think, yeah, there's been kind of a boomerang or pendulum swing, if you will, of types of forgiveness or way I've been thinking about it previously, and now I'm kind of ending up in kind of the middle space of that pendulum swing has finally settled down to the middle of just kind of both of those extremes, I think.
I think my own journey has also been a bit of a pendulum
Yeah.
because I think that it was a lot of stubbornness wrapped up in the
Ooh,
idea of
yeah.
forgiveness. Whether it was I was stubborn that I had been wronged in some way and I was deserving of an apology,
Hmm.
or if it was stubborn that I really wanted to maintain a given relationship and so I was willing to forgive and forget even though I was maybe being treated poorly.
Yeah. I think there's also a part of like forgiveness that I think comes with being young. It's like, sure, I forgive, but I'm not going to forget because, like, it's like a forgive and remain a martyr about it. You know what I mean? Like, oh, yes, I forgave them, but I am perpetually a victim because of this thing that's happened forever. And I think that's part of growing up too and kind of learning a little bit more about forgiveness. It's like forgiveness is forgiving a person for what they've done, or forgiving a situation or a group of people or whatever. But it's also, again, making peace with it and understanding that at the end of the day, shitty things happen to all of us in one way or another, and your shitty experiences form you into who you are. So, in some of the worst things in my life, I can look back and say that was objectively terrible. But I'm not going to spend the rest of my life and say, oh my gosh, I'm this great victim that all of these horrible things have happened. Please look at me and witness me in all of my my victimhood. So I think it's important to reframe constantly as you're going through life and experiencing these things.
Yeah, it's interesting perspective too, because it can be very easy to get, eh, candidly stuck in that like woe is me, uh,
Hmm.
woe was I kind of
Yeah.
space, and not realize that you do have agency. And sometimes the first part of that agency starts with forgiveness.
Yeah. Right. It's crazy because I think agency is such a big piece of that. Like at the end of the day, things are going to happen to you, but it's your responsibility to own what your life looks like moving forward and understand that this is not the last bad thing that's going to happen to you. Another bad thing is going to happen to you. You're going to have to exercise forgiveness again. But think about how might that change you? How are you going to come out the other side of it? So it's that agency and kind of owning yourself and owning your life and your personality and your trajectory and everything following whatever this thing is, whatever this thing that requires forgiveness is. And I think a lot of people forget about the agency and also the inevitability of forgiveness, or I guess situations that require forgiveness, right?
Is there like something pivotal or very influential in your past that was one of the biggest lessons that you had in forgiveness?
I would have to say probably my relationship with my mom is probably one of those the biggest piece I can really think of. Um, I don't know how far we want to go diving down this rabbit hole, but I've had a very complex relationship with my mom, as have all of my siblings, for our entire lives. And our relationship with our mom started very kind of crazy when we were young because we were poor. My mom was a drug abuser. There was a lot of time where we were alone because my mom was out doing God knows what. And then we spent time in the system. We were in foster homes and shelters and separated from each other because some homes only took boys or girls or whatever. And, there was just a lot of time where we were just forgotten a lot growing up. And then there was a time in our life where my mom became saved and she was on fire for God. And now our lives changed from this parent who was inherently absent all the time, who never cared for us, who now suddenly was helicopter mom. And there was
Ah,
just a lot of guilt for not being a certain way. And you can't listen to secular music and you can't do these things. And if you're not behaving this way, like God is never going to forgive you. And it was just like this complete shift in dynamic. And we experienced another shift that at each one of us, once we became a certain age, my mom was kind of like, oh, well, I'm done being a mom now. So, oh, you're 16 or 17, you can figure it out. And so when each one of us reached a certain age, she just kind of like forgot us, just kind of pushed us out into the world and was like, figure it out. And a prime example of this is when I turned 17 and was accepted to college, and now I'm getting ready for the very first time my trailer and my mountain home, and I'm about to go travel to the Bay Area for the first time. My mom was just kind of like, okay, well, we'll see you when I see you. And so I had to like talk to neighbors and figure out how to get to the Bay Area because we didn't have
wow.
we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have anything. We didn't have internet most of the time. And so I talked to a neighbor friend who printed out MapQuest directions for me. And they called a friend they knew in the Bay Area so that I could arrive the day before I'm supposed to land in college, stay the night at a stranger's house, and then finish the drive to school. And so I'm driving 8 hours from home with MapQuest directions. And I come home for the first weekend for college and found out that my mom moved and didn't tell me, and like moved to a different state. And I showed up to an empty house going, "Where the hell are you?" And things like this happened all the time to the older kids. It's just once you reach a certain age, her job is done. So when I entered into the world, I became hyper independent because I'd already spent a lot of my time in my early years caring for myself and my siblings. And then as I got old enough to, according to my mom, be launched out into the world with no support, I was alone. I was alone in college. I managed it myself. I mean, I was working multiple jobs and paying for school myself. And it's just kind of like our relationship became this really distant, well, okay, if I don't have your support, then like I just don't have you and I don't have a relationship with you. And my mom got really sick at some point. Because she was a drug user in the early 90s, she got hepatitis C. And hepatitis C basically destroys your liver. She ended up getting liver disease, was able to cure her hepatitis, but she now had liver disease that she had to basically live with for the rest of her life. And as I'm an adult, we're learning about this and how severe it actually is now. And there's a lot of, "Oh, well, I'm your mom. Aren't you going to care for me?" Like, "Oh, I'm your mom. Aren't you going to everything and just come be my primary person?" And it was just like, no. I am living an entire life now, and I am an adult, and I'm independent, and I didn't have you when I needed you, so then why would I be the person that you need right now? And there was just a lot of that attitude between me and my mom and my siblings. Crazy enough, despite all of my want and my need to push away and reject my mom, it was actually her who pushed forward and said, "No, we need to fix this." And I very much was
Wow.
like, "Forget that. I'm good actually. See you never." And she was the one that was like, "No, we need to fix this." And so she started harassing me and was like, "We need to talk." And so I was like, "All right, you want to talk? Let's talk." And that started what ended up being a multi-year conversation, where my mom and I just slowly worked on things and fixed things. And my mom has since passed. And 2 years ago, when she passed, I'm happy to say that uh, her coming around, our relationship, this huge catalyst that really made me start thinking about forgiveness in a way that was completely different than what I thought about before, is like in a much better place. And I'm like really good and feel good about where we were left by the time she left us. Right. So it's kind of like a very long story long, but I think generally speaking, my mom and my relationship is really what got me thinking about
No, I mean, I mean, first off, that what an incredibly painful thing for a child to go through, to be launched away like that and have no support. And listening to your story made me really reflect, because there's a lot of, unfortunately, similarities that I
it.
experienced
Yeah.
in my own background. Um, it wasn't my mother, and it was, in this case, it was my father. He was an alcoholic.
I have
And
one of those too. Girl, are we best friends? Did we just
uh,
become best friends?
I wanted to ask, since you mentioned siblings, before I clarify further, are you the eldest?
I am not.
Okay.
I on my mom's side, because all four of us have different dads. I have my sister's the oldest. I'm the second oldest, and then there's two boys underneath us. My alcoholic father also had a son who is older, and I actually didn't learn about him until about 3, 4 years ago. Now I found him on 23andMe. So I am apparently now, according to all the siblings that I own, now smack dab in the middle of all four of them.
Wow.
Yeah, I have a lot of these great stories, but please tell me more about your father. I want to hear a little bit more about your story as well and our parallels.
Ultimately came here to the US on a, green card application back in the 90s. And, my mom had to give up her job at the time, in order to be able to make the move. The idea was she would support him in the move, and when things had stabilized in the US, he would help her relaunch her career.
Mm.
That never happened.
Mm.
But I some of my earliest memories usually involve like my dad drinking in some capacity. His favorite brand was John Walker's Black Label.
Oh, okay.
It would be in like the wet bar area. The last house we all lived in together. I mean, many of moments in my childhood are just full of a lot of like conflict and raised
Yeah.
voices, and that's kind of all of that anxious energy, loud, kind of almost dysfunctional energy is what settled into me and
That
manifested a lot
tension
of
just
my
settles in the back
anxiety.
of your shoulders. Yeah. It just
I
forms you into who you are.
Exactly. And I also, as a result of having in some way my mom in survival mode, who trying her best to navigate essentially like a domestic violence situation and navigate having an unstable partner, trying her best to take care of me and my younger
Mm-hmm.
sister, realizing I didn't necessarily have support for my parents. So I also became very hyper independent to the
Mm-hmm.
point where I didn't trust people, to the point where I knew that the only person I could rely on was myself. And it wasn't this, reliance in a proud way. It was this reliance in a toxic way where I just
In
didn't
a
want to trust.
survival way. Yeah.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
It was a survival way. And I didn't break out of that until I moved to the Bay, if I'm being honest, because that meant I was actually away from Jersey and away from that environment and away from the people that had put me in that situation. And obviously decided at some point to go no contact with my father. And he still reaches out on occasion, but I don't really talk to him. And, he's got a new life now. He remarried. Um, Married someone my age and has two kids.
Ah, Dad, what are you doing? Ah, dang. Yeah, I don't know what that is. I honestly I had a stepdad growing up. At one point my mom was married to him for about 15 years. Surprise. Turns out that neither one of my brothers are his, but we both thought that they were his. We didn't find out until much later that no, there was much infidelity, but he basically divorced my mom, remarried some other woman, had another daughter and gave her my middle name. What are we Why? Dads, what are we doing? We can do better than this, you guys. We don't need to marry women the age of our daughters, and we don't need to have new daughters and give them names that are already allocated to their daughters. Like, why are they doing this?
I mean, my dad finally got the son he always wanted. So that was definitely part of it, I'm sure. And, I have nothing against my half siblings. I don't have contact with them.
Yeah. I
It
mean,
is
it's
what
not
it
their
is.
fault, but at the same time, it's like, they're kind of the product of a family that is just born of toxicity, right? So it's kind of hard to also maintain a relationship with them while also not having a relationship with your father. So it's kind of, they're prepackaged, I feel like.
They are.
Oof, yeah. I mean, I guess start preparing for that conversation now in case it ever happens.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think for me, forgiveness is wrapped up in this very, I mean, you mentioned earlier talking about, it's okay to be angry. It's okay to be frustrated, but kind of falling more into that space of, but you have to forgive and like find that grace within yourself for your own benefit. And that's been my journey with forgiveness, is because I did not know until obviously I processed this in therapy. I did not know I had a lot of anger about how I grew up because I suppressed all that anger. I I was angry for what happened to me, but I was also angry about what I didn't get. I didn't get the cookie cutter family that everybody else got. And that was really, really upsetting. The more I understood what had happened to me, what I had experienced, and how it is categorized in this space that is like deeply clinical and deeply bad. And it's like, well, that sucks. And I just got more and more angry. And I'm still, and maybe in some capacity, working through that anger. But on the other side of that is some sense of sadness, some sense of, okay, well, I can't, I don't have a time machine. I can't change any of that.
Right. Yeah,
So
totally.
I move forward, and it drastically changed the course of my entire life. I read a lot of sci-fi. I love sci-fi. I constantly think about, you know, not constantly, but I think about the parallel universe that's out there where I got that life and I didn't
Yeah.
have to become the person I am today from a place of trauma and develop the skills that I have from a place of trauma, and that I actually grew up this way and developed these skills because of a normal life, let's say.
Hmm. Yeah, I
Um,
would say that I'm probably as well adjusted as I am because of the issues I've gone through in my life, because of the challenging relationships, because of the childhood that the issues with my mom. I feel like I wouldn't have in earnest as an angry teen and an early 20-year-old charged out into the world with the defiance that I did if I had been provided this white picket fence life that I always had wanted with a supportive mom and dad and all of this. I think I would have relied on them a lot and I would have been too scared to do a lot of things. And I think a lot of my early years, I was really afraid. I was really introverted. I was scared of people in social situations and I would never use my voice and I would never advocate for myself. And, being thrust out into the world in a way where I knew that I had no safety net, it really helped me form my I guess my goals and how I went about things and how I executed every single day with a passion of, well, nobody's going to help me, so I better do it myself. And so I feel like I've accomplished a lot in my life because of where I've come from. And so it's also thinking about things in that way, like I have no choice but to look back at the situations that I've experienced and forgive the people who to me, because at the end of the day, I am who I am because of those things. And I would never wish the things that I've gone through on other people, on other children like that. But it's like at the same time, I'm eternally grateful for my fire and I'm eternally grateful for my resilience and my ability to stand back up every time I'm slapped down. And also my ability to look at lower level problems and be like, that is not a big deal. Like, I have seen worse, honey. Let's do this. So, it's like at the end of the day, those things are horrible, but they shape you into who you are, and they help inform every decision you make from there on out.
it one of the songs I mentioned in a prior episode, I talk about how certain music, certain songs remind me of that space that I was in my
Ooh.
childhood. And one of the songs that I would listen to a lot, Destiny's Child, I'm a Survivor.
Yeah.
Like I and that would be like an anthem. And like at the same time, maybe the more like 2000s version was like Kelly Clarkson's like song, like what doesn't kill me makes you stronger. And it's like, I think one of the things that occurred to me, which I was really grappling with the reality of this realization, was, would I not be this person if it wasn't for the trauma that I went through? And I think part of it felt so like disorienting, that like, well, that feels really wrong and also kind of weird to think about. And then I processed a little bit of it with my therapist, and she gave me a different perspective on it, and I'm very grateful for it. And she reminded me that it's incredibly likely that a lot of the skills that I developed as a result of my trauma were already there. They
Hmm.
just activated at a much earlier point in life
Yeah.
because of what I was going through.
You had like sleeper cell skills that were activated with the one magic word.
Essentially. So I think what I heard from that like reframe was, oh, okay, like this is not something that if I had had the white picket life that I wouldn't have had. These skills might have just manifested at a different point in life. And
Interesting.
I think that helped because I didn't want to think that it's necessary to go through an experience like that in order to become that type of person. And
Yeah,
like, I
totally.
am very proud of the person I am today, just like you. I know
Hmm.
I was forged in those challenges, in that trauma. But I also need to have grace for myself to know that I didn't have to go through it in order to be successful.
I
And
love
it
that.
sounds like a
That's
weird way to
awesome.
put it.
No, I think it's awesome. I think understanding that, you always have those things inside of you, and just what triggered it in that moment is your experiences. And that doesn't mean that necessarily I wouldn't have been a fighter later on in my life, but maybe it would have taken a different scenario or longer later on in my life to find those things about myself. I think that's a very interesting perspective. I like that.
I think it actually helped me move forward with starting to forgive, maybe less so my dad, because that's a ship
That's a
that
whole
sailed.
thing.
But even my mom, I mean, she didn't necessarily have any control in the situation that she was in. And because I was in this space of trying to really understand what I had been through, I appropriated some level of blame to
Mm,
her as the
yeah,
parent figure. But in order for me to find a way forward with forgiveness, I had to understand that she had very little control too of that situation.
so true.
And I'm still working through my relationship with her, and it has gotten a lot better. And my sister and I have also processed that we got two different versions of my mom. My
Hmm.
sister gets one version of my mom, and I get a different version. My sister and I are 4 years apart. I'm also someone whose characteristics, my drive, my ambition is something that comes from my father. And
Hmm.
so that's like a maybe a level of forgiveness I'm finding in myself is like I can have these attributes, I can have these qualities that remind my family of my dad, but I don't have to be him.
Right. Yeah. I love that.
But I mean, it's an ongoing journey. I don't know if there's a timeline you can put on forgiveness. And I think somehow I don't know if it's the
Yeah.
movies out there and how quickly they show all this taking place that like people think it's an instantaneous thing that
No.
you hear an apology and you're supposed to say accept your apology right away. Some
Mm-mm.
people never get an apology.
Right. Sometimes you'll never get an apology. And I feel like a lot of like, I guess like a really important component in my perspective of forgiveness is like a desire for like freedom rather than like an inherent retaliation. And at the end of the day, if somebody wrongs you or something horrible has gone awry in your life, you may never get an apology. You may never have somebody look you in the face and say, "Hey, I did you dirty," because oftentimes they don't think they did. And this was a lot of the fight that I had with my mom at the beginning. Was I was like, "Do you realize what we had to go through, what we did?" And she's like, no, I remember it this way. And it's like, just because you remember it that way does not mean that this wasn't an inherent trauma for your kids. Like you don't think about this because you were high having the time of your life over here, where like strangers are making us breakfast over here because they stumbled upon us being home alone for the third day in the row. Like, do you understand that you're never going to look at things in the way that we did? And for a long time, I never got apologies from her. And so I had to kind of start like forming my own path to that freedom and kind of like releasing that hostility and that anger, and not necessarily her necessarily, but just I'm never going to get an apology from her because she doesn't feel like she did anything wrong. And unless I want to spend the rest of my life just obsessing over what should have been and not just accepting what is and moving on, like I would have been miserable. I would have spent my entire life just constantly spiraling on like what I should have had, who I should have been, the life that I should have been given when I was a kid, the resources I should have been given to help me through college and help me have important social structures that I had to learn all by myself. Like I think, oh, to be very cliche here, but at the root of it, I think we need to really think about the freedom that comes with forgiveness when you stop demanding, requiring, or even expecting an apology. Because not
Hmm.
everybody's going to give it to you. And chances are, more likely than not, they're not going to give it to you. So I think it's just finding that freedom, the acceptance internally of what is versus what should have been, I think are like some of the big things to really like think about in moments like that and in situations. Because again, none of us are ever going to be living the remainder of our lives without conflict, without being wronged in some way, without feeling like
100%.
we we need to forgive, right? So I think it's just something to really, at the core, just think about the freedom that you need as a person, where you need to be happy at the end of the day. And is holding on to that spite and that anger and that whatever that is really going to form you into the best version of yourself? Probably not. So, like, take a deep breath and be like, wow, this sucks. Grieve it until you're done grieving it, and then let it go.
Do you think there's any time where going through that, I mean, you phrase it more like as freedom for yourself, but is there any point where, in the past or even now, where forgiveness is more of a self betrayal? And does that even come up?
I'm not sure. I feel like there were like other things that had happened earlier in my lives where I feel like part of me maybe is like betraying myself because I've forgiven this situation or this person or whatever. And not to get too graphic here, but with like sexual abuse things. And like, I should look back at those people and hate them for the rest of my life because they're terrible and they're freaking predators and they're awful. But it's like, there is a certain part of me who's like, moved on and I've forgiven and be like, yeah, you're a terrible person. And I can't believe that you were released into the world, and like I should be angry about that, and that feels like almost a betrayal of my younger self to have my older
Mm.
version of myself be like, oh, okay, I've forgiven and I've moving on. And it's like, yeah, part of me does think that like maybe I should just be mad for the rest of my life. Maybe I should just like hate that person, that situation, everybody who was involved for the rest of my life, and just have a fiery passion burn in my veins until the day that I die. But like, is that really going to make me happier to just live with that absolute just ick in my life for the rest of my life? Is that really going to make my everyday experience better? Am I going to be a happier person? How am I going to benefit from being that hateful person, right? So yeah, I think in some ways part of me thinks that maybe the younger version of myself would be like, are you kidding me? I can't believe that you would ever forgive. I can't believe that you would ever try to move on. This is the worst thing that's ever happened. And yes, I understand that that is a horrible and one of the most horrific things that could happen to a person, but also life is long and full of horrors, and that is not going to be the only time in life that you're going to be forced with a horrible thing. Different brands and versions, yes, but like life is long and sometimes horrible. So you got to like really be prepared to always come out the best version of yourself. And you have to always be working on the best version of yourself. Always try to be putting your best foot forward, and take a deep breath and smile and like get sunshine on your face and just experience life in the best ways you can. Because if you can't, like, you're going to absolute descend into madness of hatred and retaliation and anger, and that's no way to live for anybody, right? So I think it's important to understand that your perspectives can change as you get older, as you mature, as you gain more life experience. And you can feel like maybe there's a little bit of a conflict in how you would perceive things when you're younger or first experiencing something versus however many years later. And understand that it could feel like a betrayal from the younger version of you looking out, but looking out as that person back to your younger self, you kind of constantly have to be doing that dance and that battle with yourself and be like, I see how you can see that younger version of me. But also, you have to understand that life is long, and let's think about all the other things in life.
Yeah, I
if that
mean, the perspective from when these events happened, we were children, and so very
Mm-hmm.
much very specific view on the world, very specific life experiences. And I mean, it's there is a lot of nuance I've gained because I had assumed incorrectly that when I had moved to the Bay that I had shaken off everything. It's almost like a lot of my PTSD steps like started at that moment because I started disassociating from huge
Mm-hmm.
portions of my childhood, and I
Interesting.
actually
Yeah.
started forgetting things. And even now to this day, there are huge chunks I don't remember anymore. It was almost like as soon as I moved to the Bay, my brain was like, okay, we're safe. We could just eject everything else that just
Yeah.
happened to you.
Isn't that crazy how your brain does that in like a way of protecting itself? You just start forgetting things.
And once I ejected it, I was like, okay, I'm good. We're good. Like, we're out of the situation. Everything's fine. Only then to realize that no, who you are, like the way you were programmed, nothing's changed. You may have removed yourself from the environment, but you are still the person who was trying to survive in that environment.
You're still the product of that environment.
You still need to go do the work now. And I didn't even realize that until 4 years ago when I went to go start therapy for anxiety, only to find all the other acronyms underneath that.
Yeah.
And get diagnosed with PTSD and understand, like, oh, okay, like, the official books don't recognize complex PTSD, but it's technically complex PTSD, which originates
Mhm.
from childhood.
Yep.
Uh, and at the end of the day, no, I was not okay. And I had a whole host of things that were manifesting in my relationships, in my friendships, in the way I conducted myself with porous boundaries, the way I approached burnout like it was a life goal. Uh,
Oh, that
and
hits hard.
I
Yeah.
I was a workaholic, and I was like, oh yeah, this is normal. And then no, that's not normal. That's not
No,
what
there's
normal
something
looks
so
like.
real about seeking validation at work because you're burning yourself out and putting in all of this effort. And everybody at work is like, what are you doing? Like, just do your job. Why are you doing seven people's job? And you're like, but I'm really good at this. And please tell me I'm doing a great job. And it's just like, oh, let it
Especially
go.
when you
Go to
find something
therapy.
you're really good at. And you're like,
Yes.
wow, I'm really good at it. And people think I'm doing great and I can get paid for it. And that
Oh,
takes me away from my financial scarcity childhood mindset. Oh, great.
yeah.
I'll just do more of this.
Oh gosh, yeah, so real. I've spent so much time in my early 20s working 70-hour weeks in a shit job just because like I'm good at the thing that I'm doing and I now need to be the best at what I'm doing. And I need to prove to them that I'm a really hard worker and seeking in some small scale ways like personal validation and satisfaction and working yourself to the absolute death is just not where it's at.
I think through the course of realizing that and then doing the work on that had to come a huge amount of self compassion that I had to learn for myself,
Yeah.
because I was willing to give it out, but I wasn't willing to give it to myself.
Ooh.
So we talk about forgiveness to yourself is like I was really hard on myself, and that's the perfectionist in me, and the side of
Mhm.
me that thinks that my value is driven by how much value I can create for others,
Yeah.
and then it turns into I'm burning out and I don't have any boundaries and I need to actually start treating myself with a little bit more respect
Mhm.
and find a way to also forgive myself for burning myself out. And it
Mhm.
kind of feels like a bit of a Mobius strip where it's just like coming right back to the beginning.
Yeah, I feel that. I think it's hard looking back and realizing that in moments of okay, I'm out in the world now. I've exited this traumatic experience and now I'm figuring it out for myself. You start recognizing patterns where you put everybody above yourself and you treat everybody with these insane levels of compassion and you're empathetic and you're kind and you're giving and the one person you mistreat the most is yourself and you do not care for yourself emotionally, you do not care for yourself physically, you always put everybody above. And I think one of the things that I've learned from my marriage and from my husband that I appreciate the most is understanding that like yes, it's good and important to put other people first, but sometimes you have to put yourself first. You have to instill a boundary. You have to take care of you. You have to take care of yourself mentally because you can't actually care for anybody if you're not cared for. At the end of the day, the care that you provide for other people, whether that be emotionally, physically, financially, whatever it is, it's it's going to suffer. It's never going to be the level you want it to be at if first you are not taken care of. Growing up as like a fundamental Christian, like conservative Christian in very formative years of my life, I was always taught like you always give 120% of yourself, always, always, always. And there's never a consideration for the self at all because that's selfish. And Christianity is not about being selfish. And so there's just like this really inherent, I got to give, 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 give at work, give every spare moment I have. And oh, okay, I have a few extra dollars, but you need it, so take everything I have. Or, just whatever it is. It's just inherently giving too much of yourself and never focusing on yourself. And really it's important in those years of creating your own personality and who you are and how you're going to attack the problems in the world to take care of yourself mentally, take care of your issues, your problems. Go to therapy. Oh my gosh, forgive yourself for the things that you've done wrong, because again, nobody's blameless. There's shit that I've done in this world that's been, I'm sure, horribly traumatic to other people, and it's like I have to take ownership of that. I have to accept that. I have to say, damn, I really messed up there. And like, I have to think through how to fix that, how to change that, how to be a better person, and like forgive myself when I fail, inevitably, over and over and over again. I think that's so important as like a young professional, is just like, take a deep breath, take care of you. At the end of the day, it's just a job, just,
Yeah. And
you got to take care of you.
there's two threads that I just thought of when you were recalling that, and it's actually really interesting that you mentioned that your husband was kind of maybe the proponent of your first foray into boundaries
Hmm.
a little bit, because my fiance was the one who told me
Really?
early, very early in my
uh,
time, that hey, are you sure you need to come in on the weekend and work on those laptops? And I was like, yeah, it needs to get done. We have new hires on Monday. And he's like, "Oh, but do you have to be the one to do that?" And like, and I was gung ho. I'm like, well, I'm going to do the work. The work needs to get done. And he made me question, well, but do you have to be the one to do it? And
you're
I
like,
kind of
oh
sat
my
there like,
gosh.
uh, you mean life isn't work? Oh, I didn't think about it that way.
Huh. Interesting.
But he was the first one, and ever since that moment, like, I've kind of, not in a like, every moment recalculated kind of way, but I kind of hear that advice in my head when I'm possibly overextending myself. It's like,
Yeah.
well, does this need to be done now? Do I need to be the one who's doing it? I mean, is there a reward for doing it early?
All important questions. All
Yeah.
important questions.
The second thing you were mentioning too about like the forgiveness of maybe the things you've done to others is like probably the one that, I'm aware of and still a work in progress is probably the things that I've done to my sister. The way we grew up, seeing my parents dysfunctional the way they were, I was older and I saw it for what it was. My sister was younger. She was probably closer to 8 or 9 at the time. So still very naive about the world and kind
Sure.
of
Right.
took what she saw for face value and didn't necessarily see the truth behind it.
Hmm.
Was very much a daddy's girl, and so was very close to my dad, and it was deeply frustrating for me, and I would mistreat her in some way because she was close to my dad, and because I
Yeah.
there wasn't anything I could do because she was in, as a child I was like, well, why are you listening to him? But like,
Yeah. I mean, you have so little in your control at that age, and what you can control is how you treat your siblings, right? And especially if you're mad or frustrated or jealous or whatever that emotion is at the relationship that she has with him. And she's also living in this more of an ignorant world, not really necessarily understanding how damaging it is. And you're seeing things for what it is. Like, yeah, it makes sense that at that age, what you can control is your relationship with your sister. So, yeah, you can say and do whatever you want and release those frustrations. And I can totally see that. I can totally see that.
yeah, and I think, I mean, part of it honestly might have been like low-key jealousy that I couldn't have that same ignorance,
Sure. Yeah.
because
Like, great. I'm so glad that you still get to believe in Santa. And I have to understand that he's not real and the magic is gone for me. Like in kind of that vein of like, how dare you still be able to live in this world where you understand reality to be X when really it's Y?
yeah, that one's interesting. But when we think about like, societal narratives around forgiveness or even cultural narratives around forgiveness, is there ones that like really frustrate you that seem to be very predominant in society that kind of get forwarded a lot? I think one of the ones is forgive and forget for me.
Yeah.
Because I think it's
I think,
possible to forgive somebody and not necessarily forget, more so for your own
oh,
protection, because you shouldn't
100%.
necessarily forget.
Yeah, I think a lot of the societal expectation around forgiveness is just like excusing behavior, and I don't think that's
Mm,
appropriate. I think a lot of people are like, "Oh, well, you forgave them, so it's okay." And it's like, "No, what they did was not okay. I'm not excusing the behavior. I am not saying that it's okay or that should that have ever happened to anybody else." And I think this just like it's just kind of a twisted perception of forgiveness, in my opinion, is just like the excuse of the behavior. And I don't think that it's good to forgive and forget. I think you should always forgive, but also learn from. Not a forgive and never forget, but like just to forgive and learn from and like open and refine your world experience and understanding based off of the situation. Understanding that this person wronged you in this way because their behavior or their actions were bad or negative or traumatic or whatever they were. So it's forgiving but like opening your understanding and your world perspective in a way that's important to kind of like help and protect you for situations like this later on. It's not excusing their behavior, it's not writing it off as okay, it's understanding the negativity for what it is and refining your worldview, your perception, how you approach these situations moving forward, considering what you've gone through. So I think that's the negative part of it in my mind, is just this like, oh, I'm just going to write it off as it's totally fine because I forgave them. It's like, no, that shit's not okay. It's super not okay.
and I'm going to add on to what you said about like learning from it. I think you learn discernment from those
Yeah,
situations. I think
so
it's
important.
about learning information that you may not have had before that you can then use in the next occurrence to approach it differently, whether it means
Yeah.
maybe not giving them sensitive information because they shared a secret. Um,
Hmm.
it's like, okay, well, I'll forgive you, but I'm going to remember that you did that so
Yeah.
that next time maybe I don't share something so sensitive because I know you may reshare it.
I think discernment is such an underrated concept and underrated word. And I'm so glad that you brought it up. And there's been like situations in my life where it's like, yes, I think the situations that I've gone through and the horrible things I've gone through has like really provided me a sense of discernment in a lot of ways that I don't think I would have had before. A prime example of this is one of my girlfriends fresh out of college. She started falling for this guy who was like inherently obviously toxic. Like he's super handsome though, like super playboy guy, and like all of her sisters and all of her friends were like, do not date him, he's not going to be good for you. You know what I said? Girl, get it, go date him if you need to. Like, you make your own choices, go do it. We all knew it was going to end horribly, but you know what it did? It ended horribly, and then she like gained this level of discernment about men, relationships, etc., that helped her raise her standards for future relationships. And she's able now to like identify behaviors that she wouldn't have been able to before. If she just listened to everybody in her life and said, don't date him because we don't think he's good for you, she would have never been able to like discern those things for herself and understand green flag, what is a red flag, what do certain behaviors and relationships mean. And I'm always like a big advocate of like making mistakes, forgiving yourself for those mistakes, because again, at the end of it all, you're gaining levels of discernment. You're like nat 20 like discernment every single time, when like you need those skills to be able to like walk through life successfully. So it's like, try things, fail, forgive yourself for not being the best version of yourself sometimes, because at the end of the day, discernment is going to be what gets you to the finish line. That's how you're going to get the good job. That's how you're going to find your person should you want to get married to somebody. That's how you're going to reach your goals, is like developing your discernment in a way that's really meaningful. So sorry for the tangent, but I felt like
No,
discernment was like such a really good hit.
I love that because I think that's what I've been trying to articulate whenever I'm noticing that people are feeling very frustrated about the way their choices played out. I was like, okay, well, next time you're going to be more discerning. Like, it's not necessarily wrong that a
Yeah.
particular
And that's another
situation
question
turned
I like to
out.
ask my friends. Yeah, it's like every time they go through a harsh relationship breakup or something, I'm like, well, what'd you learn? And they're like, oh. I'm like, yeah, well, what'd you learn from this? Oh, well, I learned that when this guy does this or whatever in this relationship, like I shouldn't do this and they should do this or whatever. I'm like, okay, great. Like you're learning things that are helping prepare you for future situations. So, good or bad, whatever the situation is, if you've failed, if you've been hurt, if you've been wronged, what have you learned from this? You're like refining your discernment in a way that's really meaningful and will better you in future situations. So, what'd you learn? Okay. It sucks. It's awful to look at yourself and be like, well, maybe I need to fix this. Okay, that's great. That's also self awareness. Great. So you're learning that too. Okay. Your discernment for your own self is also okay. And that's important as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't play D&D. I would love to play D&D, but it kind of feels like rolling high on perception.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's like a high perception role. And perception, yes, you need to have a clean understanding and perception of what the situation is from like a clear high level. It's important to also, when you're going through situations, understand that, like in a relationship or in a friendship, when something goes wrong, it can't always be the other person. You have a part to play in every relationship that you have. And even if at the end of the day there was more wrongdoings on the other person, you're never going to be blameless in every situation. So, what was your responsibility in the conflict? What was your responsibility in this? And I think it's always important to like think about the perception from the high level. Who's from somebody looking from sky bird view down? Who's at fault in what direction? And probably more often than you like to admit, it's you. Sometimes it's you. And it's okay to say, wow, that's something that I'm discerning about myself now, is that sometimes I can victimize or I can catastrophize or I can whatever. And I just need to take a deep breath. Okay, how do I fix me moving forward? Because that's the only thing you control is yourself.
Yeah. And I think, technically both GAD and PTSD make me neurodiverse, not in the same sense of neurodiversity from like development neurodiversity, but
Sure.
more from an experience perspective. And I think also about how, I mean, generally I've noticed a lot of people with neurodiversity, even with ADHD and neurodiversity, it's very hard on themselves. There's lack of
Yeah.
compassion for yourself. And
Yeah.
there's some of, unfortunately or fortunately, the best like life lessons come from making those mistakes and then forgiving yourself for them.
Hmm.
And it
You have
doesn't
to.
mean that you're bad or wrong or broken in any way.
Yeah. I think as somebody who has so real because you can look at other people in other situations and be like, oh, they don't suffer time blindness. They can show up on time for things, or they don't have executive function freezes. They can just do the laundry or do their chores or do whatever it is. And they're not absolutely paralyzed because they just can't do it in this moment. And there's just things where you can be so hard on yourself about things because you're not functioning or behaving or reacting to something in the same ways that other people are. So I think that's absolutely, you've hit the nail on the head as well. It's like you have to practice, especially when you are neurodiverse, experiencing neurodiversity, that you have to constantly be like, yeah, I'm maybe falling short in this moment, but it's okay. Like, take a deep breath. It's not the end of the world. Like, forgiveness inevitably it has to land on yourself as well for when you feel like you're falling short. So I totally, totally get it.
What are some of the like high level questions or scripts that you run through in your head when you find yourself, you know, if you find yourself blaming yourself for not doing the thing or matching that level of executive function? What are the questions you ask yourself to find that self-compassion and that forgiveness? I wish I could remember the name right now, but one very famous doctor akined it to having glasses. ADHD just means that you need glasses. You just don't have perfect vision. It's basically the equivalent to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the one way I've been able to manage a little bit more effectively in the last handful of years, because I'm not medicated, so I'm just, out here in the world, just crushing life, no medication. But when I find myself struggling and with executive function freezes or time blindness or, any of those things, I have to, if I feel myself failing or what I perceive to be failing, I just take a deep breath and I have to just constantly remind myself that like it's okay. It's not life threatening. And my anxiety can tell me sometimes that it is. I can panic about something and be like, I'm feeling in this way and I'm not doing right by my husband or my friends or my whoever because I'm failing in this way. And I do that a lot. And so I have to just take a deep breath and be like, okay, well, my husband knows this about me. my friends know this about me. Like, they're going to, at the end of the day, say, oh, Brittany, she's just doing X, Y, and Z again. And it's really just me catastrophizing at the end of the day. Catastrophizing, excuse me. And so I have to just constantly be reminding myself it's not the end of the world. Just take a deep breath and just do the thing. And I recently, it's been more around like daily chores and daily life responsibilities and making that phone call to the bank or to the insurance company or following through with that task that seems overwhelming. And I've been having to give myself pep talks lately where it's just like, it's hard. Do the hard thing. Just do it. And then you never have to think about it again. And the reward is I never have to think about it again because my anxiety plays these hard, difficult tasks on repeat. And it's like I'm going through my day and I have a loop of like really anxious things in the back of my mind that are constantly haunting me. And I'm putting them off because of my ADHD or whatever it is. And it's like, it's really a tough nut to crack when you have to live with both anxiety and ADHD every day, let me tell you. But my reward is you never have to think about it again if you do it right now. And so I find myself like trying to tackle those tasks now as fast as I can, because then my reward is I never have to think about it again. Is that right? No, obviously not. I'm going to have to make another call to the bank at some point, or I'm going to have to go to the ATM at some point. Like, obviously, it's just my way to kind of like coach myself through those and be like, give yourself some grace. It's okay. Take a deep breath, have a cup of coffee first, and then do that thing so that you never have to do it again. So it's like, give yourself some grace. Forgive yourself for this absolute insane anxiety loop that's in the back of your mind. Just do the hard thing. So that's been helpful lately.
No, that's actually it seems complicated, but it actually is a very simple way to approach kind of deconstructing the spiral that you can get stuck in when
Yeah.
you're in one of those loops where you're like, I'm just useless. Like I
Yeah.
like
I can't
and
get
then you
anything
then
done.
you freeze and you don't do
Yeah.
anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the feeling useless is something that you have to constantly talk yourself out of or forgive yourself for if you find yourself not actually accomplishing as much as you want to. Because, like I will put off folding laundry until I have to do laundry again. And I've been pulling out of the same laundry basket for 3 weeks because I just haven't been able to do laundry or put it away. Like, oh, dishes should have been done last night before I went to bed and they didn't. And now I have to like do the walk of shame into the kitchen in a dirty kitchen because I didn't do the dishes. And it's like, I'm constantly on a loop of like, this is what you failed. This is what you failed. This is what you failed. And so it's both like, I guess, in a sense, practicing forgiveness and just offering yourself some grace and just being like, you're not a huge failure because you didn't start the dishwasher. Like, the world is not going to end because of that. It's okay. Just take a deep breath. You're not a failure. Now just do the hard thing so that you don't have to do it again for the rest of the morning. Like, it's just practicing grace and forgiveness and giving yourself a moment and just understanding that you're not failing at life because you're having a hard time doing a task. You're not failing at life because your anxiety is telling you that you are. Like, you just take a deep breath and understand from a high level perspective, I'm my own worst critic. And according to everybody else, their perception of me and the way that I'm doing things is always going to be softer than my own perception. So if I'm thinking about it in this negative way, let's just like take the foot off the gas by about 50%, and that's actually somebody else's perception of me. Okay, I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. So just making sure that I understand I will always be my worst critic when it comes to time blindness, when it comes to executive function freezes, when it comes to not paying attention to what I need to be paying attention to. It's like I'm always going to be my worst critic. So take a deep breath. If I'm the worst case, what are other people thinking? Okay, it's probably not as bad as I think. Okay, take yourself off the ledge, give yourself some grace, practice some forgiveness. Now move on with yourself and go start the damn dishwasher.
It's so important to practice that
I know.
self-compassion. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, you're right. You are your own worst critic, and the reality is it's probably not as bad as you've catastrophized it in your head
It's
to be.
usually not. There's a rare one off here and there where you're like, oh, damn, this was as bad as I thought. But that's so rare and so far between. It's usually never, ever as bad as I think it is. So I just have to keep remembering that and coaching myself.
Yeah. Well, we're almost at the top of the hour, which I can't believe how
I
fast
can't
that
believe either.
went.
This really flew by.
Um, but in the different spectrums that we went to from like where forgiveness comes from and your kind of core childhood beliefs around forgiveness and how that's evolved over time, you know, I'll ask the question and feel free to kick it back to me afterwards. But what is at the root of forgiveness for you?
I feel like the root of forgiveness for me is that desire for freedom rather than retaliation, and that focus on an acceptance of what is versus what could have been, what your life could have been, what your relationship could have been, what your anything could have been if that situation hadn't have happened to you. So I think at the end of the day, it's just understanding that you need to pursue a relief and a freedom in yourself, and you need to focus on the truths, the facts, what is, and not what could have been. What do you think, Hanisha? What do you think is at the root of forgiveness?
I think this is still really hard for me to answer in like in one. And I do like the concept of thinking about it as freedom. But when I think about it, it feels like some of the most recent forgiveness that I've had to find has been more about finding perspective.
Ooh, that's good.
I think it's more about reframing the situation, the circumstances, my own beliefs, other beliefs into what didn't I have information about before that gives me a different perspective on that situation that may allow me to gain freedom from it.
Hmm.
So it doesn't, I don't know if it necessarily feels like a very conscious decision because I mentioned some of it seems to be taking place over huge periods of time. So I'm
Sure,
not
yeah.
seeing it as like a moment where I feel freedom. I'm feeling it as more and more moments of perspective where
Mm,
I understand that there were circumstances out of my control, circumstances out of my mom's control, and then circumstances that I should be more aware of on the things that I need to be self like forgiving on.
hmm.
And once I've gained that perspective, somehow the forgiveness seems to follow.
Yeah, I would agree that I feel like perspective and understanding are steps to, or if really the only steps to, like the major steps to getting to forgiveness is really understanding. And I think, that relates so hard to every story I've told. Everything really relates back to an understanding and perspective. And it's looking back on the situation. And now with new gain life experiences, you can look at every situation where you've been harmed or wronged or whatever it is with a level of understanding and perspective. And that kind of helps you arrive at some point forgiveness.
Especially when there hasn't been an explicit apology provided. I think that
Hmm.
one, having perspective in that is especially critical.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for
Yeah,
chatting with me, Brittany. I
we
really
did
appreciated your time.
it.
And for the audience listening, if you all enjoyed this conversation, please feel free to leave in the comments if you'd like Brittany back on and what topic you may like us to go after. So thank you so much, Brittany.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so fun.
Likewise.